Expo facto. All right, everybody ready? John? Okay, it is 4 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the February 2nd, 2015 meeting to order with a roll call, please.
Mayor Householder?
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard?
Here.
Commissioner Crawford? Here. Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Hardy?
Here.
If all who are able would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. A moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations today, so that will move us on to our Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to bring something they want to bring before the City Commission that is not on today's agenda. We would simply ask that you limit it to 5 minutes, and please identify your name and address when you come up. Great, sure, please.
Randall Holm, Hometown Realty, 311 East Crawford, Salina. I agree with the City Commission that being civil and courteous is important, but I also want to state that that's a two-way street, not just from the public to the Commission, but to the Commission back to the public, not only in your mannerisms in your speech, but in allowing free speech. I think that limiting a taxpayer's comments to 3 minutes on something on the agenda is ridiculous and disrespectful to that taxpayer. That taxpayer feels that something is important enough to take the time away from work and or family, then that's exercising one of our most important rights and freedoms, to address our elected officials and freedom of speech. And I do not feel that that should be limited to either 3 minutes or 5 minutes if the taxpayer has stuff to say or items to say that are important to them and probably important to a lot of other people in the room. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good point. Hopefully most people could get things together within 3 to 5 minutes, but I agree there are probably times when maybe a little bit more information. And I think if we felt like there was some real compelling information, a person was not repeating himself, I think we would probably allow that time. I don't know that we've ever cut anybody off that hadn't started to repeat themselves over and over again. Should probably cut ourselves off sometimes, but
Well, there's no question the relevance is in the eye of the beholder, and usually if there's a major policy topic, we'll typically see us, like we've had in the past, set up separate input opportunities for that as well, and
right.
So that's always a good way to kind of leave it open-ended.
Yeah, but a good point. So, okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public on this issue? Or not this particular issue, but anything? Okay. If not, we'll bring it on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of January 26, 2015. Item 6.2, resolution number 15-7173, establishing and amending fees in the comprehensive fee schedule related to animal licensing and Gypsum Hill Cemetery. And item 6.3, award the 2015 Kraken Joint Maintenance Contract, project number 15-3061, to Circle C Paving and Construction, LLC, in the amount of $211,079.78, with an 8% construction contingency to take advantage of good unit prices and complete more work.
Is there an item on the consent agenda a commissioner would like either removed or amended? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve as presented.
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. And that will take us on to administration.
Item 7.1, second reading, ordinance number 15-10763, requesting a review and possible amendment of the major street plan map of the Salina, Kansas Comprehensive Plan to substitute an internally produced functional street classification map that would more clearly define the street classifications in the community than the current major street plan map, and the comprehensive plan document.
Ordinance number 15-10763 was passed on first reading on January 26, 2015. Since that time, no comments have been received. Is there anyone from the public here to speak on this issue? Okay, I'd bring it back to the commission for possible action.
I move that we pass on second reading ordinance number 15-10763.
Second.
Motion is second to pass on ordinance, second reading ordinance number 15-10763. Any discussion on this? If not, I'd get a roll call on this.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.2, second reading ordinance number 15-10764, formalizing the property tax exemption for Twin Oaks Industries Building Addition located at 2001 West Grand Avenue.
Ordinance number 15-10764 was passed on first reading on January 26, 2015. Since that time, no comments have been received. Is there anyone from the public here to speak on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Mayor, someone's here.
Oh, you have an issue on this one? Okay.
Norman Mantle, West Pleasant Hill Road, Salina. Why is the government slowly removing subsidies, yet you're adding subsidies to businesses that are already established? We're having budget cuts, so I think you need to look a little harder at these tax exemptions because we need to get a little leaner and not spend so much money on established businesses. If it's a new business, yes, they need help. But established businesses, no. So even our governor's cutting our budgets. We need to cut our spending and quit giving away free money. That's what it amounts to. We still pay for it one way or the other.
Agree. Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, bring it back for possible action then.
Move we approve on second reading ordinance number 15-10764, formalizing the property tax exemption for Twin Oaks Industries Building addition located at 2001 West Grand.
Second.
Motion is second to adopt on second reading ordinance number 15-10764. Any further discussion on this? If I could get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Householder.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.3, first reading ordinance number 15-10765, amending Salina Code Section 35-37 pertaining to the notice and removal of obstructions and encroachments.
Mr. Fraser.
Yes, Mayor and Commissioners. Staff is recommending that obstruction management issues within the right-of-way would be better handled by the city manager through the public works staff rather than the chief of police. As a general housekeeping action, staff is recommending replacing the words chief of police with city manager in section 35 through 37. Be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any circumstances in which there's resistance to the removal of these obstructions?
There may be that type of thing, and if so, that we work with other departments to be able to resolve the issue. But where it is right now is that these are more logistical types of problems. There could be a fence, there could be some landscaping that would be a problem, and that we would handle that traditionally through the engineering division of the department to be able to investigate and resolve those issues. If there's any kind of problems beyond that, obviously we could get with other departments to assist us.
Are there any circumstances in which the police have to be called to facilitate this?
Well, there could be. I mean, but most likely, no. Most of those situations would be handled better by the Public Works Department through engineering to be able to deal with site view distance issues and those types of things.
Commissioner, a couple examples of which the police department might be utilized would be one, if we're working with a citizen and they become somewhat unruly and we just don't want to have our employee subjected to that potential risk, that would be a situation. We'd have someone there. I don't think we usually have that happen, but it can happen. If by chance there's, I don't know in this situation if it would occur, but if we would need to get some form of permission from the court to get on the property to address the situation, that's a possibility. I don't think that would actually be an issue here, but that's usually if that happens, we would utilize services from the police department as well. But it's more of dealing with the owner or tenant or that aspect of it than it would be the actual act that we're addressing here.
What would be the process of this mitigation through the, I mean, it wouldn't be like an enforcement where you send them a letter and then wait 3 weeks and...
Yeah, the reality is we've been doing this for years, really kind of on behalf of the police department, and they kind of step in if they needed to because of the ordinance to kind of put the final ump behind it. And we noticed in a situation where we were addressing something in the right-of-way, an obstruction, and they were like, well, this doesn't seem like a policing role. And we're like, well, that's the way the code works. We need to follow it until we change it. So we're bringing it to you to change it to really kind of reflect how we actually do handle it. And then most of these that we always do handle most of our right-of-way issues actually through Public Works and Engineering rather than the police department, because the police department is reserved for true policing aspects, and these really aren't those types of things.
It would never be any problem with security and something like that?
No, if we, like I said, if we anticipated a security issue, as with any service we provide, we would contact the police department and ask that they have someone meet us there. But absent of that, we wouldn't really need to have their assistance.
So these are situations in which the owner is not going to be caught by surprise, then?
Oh, they could be, but generally what happens is we'll work with them with regards to time, talk about the issue, the history, kind of get their story, basically. And if we feel that the obstruction is a safety issue, needs to be removed, we'll try to provide adequate time to do that. I can't say that there might not be something in the right-of-way that we haven't noticed in a certain neighborhood for 10 years, and they're surprised because it's been there. That's always a possibility. That's why we try to work with them.
And Jason, I guess I could say that we typically work with our citizens to be able to bring to their attention that there's something that's happening on that right-of-way section that is inappropriate and needs to be changed. In most cases, the people abide and make the changes that are necessary. But if, in fact, they don't, then we could be able to do some other things to be able to work with the police department to get assistance. But for the most part, most people, are cooperative, and it's not a problem.
Would you characterize the action here being more of housekeeping in nature versus incident-driven, like there wasn't a...
Yeah, very much, because if you look at the role of the police chief, it's not to issue a ticket, it's to order, in essence, an abatement, which is what we don't do that through the police department. This is just really old and just an odd role that may have fit at one time. It's just not a role that we have the police department, we use them for anymore.
I'm going to give you a real quick scenario. Maybe you can tell me if this is covered under this or maybe something else. A while back, we were doing a lot of the seal coat and crack seal and seal coat for some of the roads, and we had some instances where cars were noticed that we were going to be doing this paving operation, and they left their cars parked out on the street, and we had to, you could see where they went around them because we weren't able to tow them. Would this help to solve that, or would that still be a problem?
You're indicating that our contractors actually went around a car?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first I've been made aware of that. That would be totally unacceptable. And what should happen is first of all, before the contractor starts, we should make sure that the car has been removed. And what happens is we do have a pre-notice. We try to notice ahead of time. Sometimes people are on vacation, and there's certain things that can happen, so it's difficult. But if for whatever reason the efforts we make to notify don't work, in the end, we reserve the right to tow the cars away at the owner's expense. And in that case, the car or cars should have been towed away. We should not have had a contractor swerve around a vehicle for that maintenance treatment.
All right. Now, would that be the responsibility then of the contractor to take care of that? I mean, they're given the ability to do that through the contract with us, or
that's a good question. I'd have to defer. I'd think that we would reserve that, but I'd have to ask.
I think that we'd work through our construction coordinator to be able to make sure that that's done.
So we would take that on through our own construction. The person that works for us is construction coordinator.
Okay.
And in that particular case, you do have situations in which, I'd have to see in that case in which you could handle it just that way, or sometimes where you could cite if there's a legal violation. We normally wouldn't double up in that case, unless someone just purposely said, I'm not going to do it, and blah, 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 and we just couldn't get them to, we would use the administrative approach rather than use police. If you had an unruly person there and we felt like we couldn't speak with them without some kind of threat of harm, then we would certainly call the police and have them meet us there so that we could have the conversation we need to have. That doesn't happen very often.
In the interest of that road, they did come and repave that spot. So it's not just an empty old spot.
Well, I saw about 3 spots, and it looked like they had gone back and
fixed it.
Well, in that case, then we were aware and had a plan B, which sounds fine.
Yeah.
The reason I say this, I've seen a community I've been in before. I wasn't responsible for the work, but I saw them go around, and they didn't come back to that spot.
Yeah,
and I thought, well, that's not something we're going to do. So we had a plan B, which is fine. And in that case, we probably, quite honestly, our folks went the extra effort to not create a harm in any way to that property owner, the cost of the towing, recognizing that we could come back. And I'm kind of recalling that situation now where we had the ability, without modifying our contract, to come back and make sure that the whole project is done. And that's fine. That works.
Related question. There's part of our ordinance says that you cannot park your car on a street for an extended period of time without using it. And I was just curious if this ordinance would apply to that situation as well.
I wouldn't think so. I think this is talking about obstructions within the right-of-way on the, between the curb and the property. Is it where if somebody puts in a fence, or they put in landscaping, or they put in a pole or a post, that and not really with anything that's in the street. I wouldn't think that it would deal with those.
So the police department would still have a role in.
That's correct.
Yeah, typically with a pure parking situation, there's a different code, and it would typically be a police department duty to address that.
It's an obstruction to traffic within the street.
How's the removal of that handled? Is it handled like any normal abatement type operation, where if they just refuse to do it, is it done and then assessed to the property, or how is that?
Well, obviously, we give the owner the first, second, probably third opportunities to take care of that. We have the ability to order it removed. I'm not sure if we've had a situation where someone has flat out not done it. I would have to ask staff. I don't know, Mike, if you're aware of any.
I'm not really aware of that. It is an awkward situation because engineering doesn't really have the code enforcement mechanism that development services has for code enforcement. So it's like what Jason said, is we try to work with the property owner to be able to get them to be able to make those changes they need to, and typically we're able to do that successfully. So we've been able to be successful at that, but we have to work with them to be able to bring to their attention that whatever they're doing there is a problem and is against our code, and they need to make changes and corrections to it.
Yeah, but if you look at the ordinance, it does say that we do have the right, and after going through those efforts, we would have the right to remove it at the expense of the owner. So we could do that. We would, in that case, we would be very sensitive to make sure that we did provide adequate notice, and usually it is multiple. We would involve multiple notices to the owner and proper legal notice and so forth, because whenever you're dealing with someone else's property, regardless of the location, you have to be sensitive to that. So we could remove it. Doesn't mean it gets thrown away necessarily. So we'd be sensitive to that as well, but we could remove it at the cost of the property owner. And so certainly we would utilize that if we actually needed to, but as I mentioned, we haven't seen that come up.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone from the public here to comment on this at all? No? Okay. Bring it back for possible action.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption on first reading ordinance number 15-10765, amending Salina Code Section 35-37 pertaining to the notice and removal of obstructions and encroachments.
Second.
Motion is second to adopt on first reading ordinance number 15-10765. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
Item 7.4, resolution number 15-7172, setting the date for a public hearing to consider whether a certain structure shall be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Commission. This afternoon, the Department of Development Services brings to you resolution number 15-7172. This resolution is to reschedule a public hearing date to consider whether or not a certain structure is to be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired. On January the 12th, 2015, the City Commission passed Resolution Number 15-7170, setting a public hearing date of February 23rd, 2015 for 3 dangerous structures, including 500 East Pacific, the U-shaped portion of that building. State statute requires a certified mailing to property owners and identified parties of interest within 3 days of the first publication of the resolution. The first publication of Resolution Number 15-7170 was January 16, 2015. The required certified mailings were completed on the same day. The resolution notification was sent to the property owner to a post office box address that, although it's a valid mailing address for the property owner and one that the property owner has requested in the past we used as a preferred address, it is not the service address of record for 500 East Pacific. The resolution was also sent to the homeowner's spouse at the service address. As of this date, none of these mailings have been claimed, signed for by either party. For this reason, staff requests that the public hearing date be rescheduled, allowing a personal service delivery of the public hearing notification and resolution. With the adoption of Resolution Number 15-7172, the following timeline will be set in motion. February 6, 2015, first publication of Resolution Number 15-7172. February 9, 2015, send via certified mail a copy of the resolution to each property owner and all identified parties of interest, including lien holders. February 13, 2015, will be the second publication of Resolution Number 15-7172. And March 16, 2015, conduct the public hearing. At that time, City Commission considers the resolution ordering repair and removal of the structure located at 500 East Pacific on or before April 30th, 2015. Staff has identified the following alternatives to the City Commission. Number 1, adopt Resolution Number 15-7172, setting March 16th as the public hearing date for the dangerous structure located at 500 East Pacific, the U-shaped portion of the structure. Or number 2, decline to set a public hearing for these dangerous structure. Staff recommends option number 1. Enclosed, you'll see part of your enclosure is the building official's request for condemnation and a draft copy of Resolution Number 15-7172.
Okay.
Any questions for staff?
Any questions of staff on this?
Just one, does the state statute require only that you mail it or that the person accept the mailing? Because if it only requires the former, you've already done what was required by the state statute.
By state statute, it's to the service address of record. So in this case, by going to the post office box, we need to send the certified mailing to the actual service address of the property.
You did that as well the first time?
One mailing went to the spouse at the service address. The property owner's mailing went to a post office box, of which was preferred as a mailing address that was given to us.
To complicate it a little bit further, the manner in which the property is owned, it's owned by an individual, and the spouse is an interested party, so we have an obligation to notify all interested parties, typically mortgage holders, but notification of the interested party does not satisfy notification of the property owner. And in this case, neither of them accepted service, but that's not required. If it was certified mail to the owner at the address of record, that would have sufficed.
If you don't go any further, I'm with you. Okay.
Well, was the address of record the post office box?
The address of record with the county was not the post office box.
Okay.
The address that we had in our system at the property owner's request was the post office box.
Commissioners, what you're seeing is an example of when an individual or a couple, however you want to look at it, choose not to take responsibility. They choose not to accept their mail. And so when that happens and we want to enforce our laws, we need to be 100% sure that we have covered the due process notification requirement. And it is a little bit more challenging if they choose to run away from their mail address. So, yeah, we did what we felt was the right thing to do. We provided it to the service address that was given to us by the individuals for those types of letters of correspondence. But this is a negative correspondence, so all of a sudden that's not the one that they want used. It goes back to the other one. So we just felt like rather than have any argument or disagreement later in the process, when you're to the point of actually getting something done and all of a sudden it just comes up, oh, wait a second, we have a minor, possibly splitting hairs, a legal issue that could become a bigger issue. Let's just eliminate it at the beginning, reset the date, do it right, and there'll be no excuses later on, and then we can go through and finish the process.
Okay.
But when folks don't want to work with you, when they don't want to clean up, when they don't want to do what they're asked to do, sometimes you have to be this detailed.
I like to pretend I don't hear Adrienne when she says stuff to me. I like that from time to time. Kind of
So
same thing.
on this,
Yeah.
and it's going back to Commissioner Davis's question on when we set this date, if he chooses not to take his mail, we're going to proceed with this item at
Yeah.
that point, or does he need to be served as a property owner before we can have that hearing?
I'll answer that with a question first, if I may. Did I understand that we are anticipating personal service based on the discussion in the blue sheet?
That would be correct.
That's correct.
We will have two forms of service on this project. This time, one through certified mail, the other would be through the personal service as well.
I would understand that the certified mailing would technically suffice, but there's nothing like personal service to take care of the situation. So I would certainly concur with the approach that I understand is being taken as being the best way to assure that the hearing can go forward with full participation.
Is there any way to be assured that the personal service would take care of it?
Yeah, show up to
Well,
the
you'll get
senior
a-
center for lunch tomorrow.
It doesn't necessarily assure the appearance of the person, but you do get a return on that service. Are we anticipating that the sheriff's department would?
Actually, our police department has been serving those for us of late.
Okay, then in either case, you would have the return on service where the officer is verifying that it has been delivered. So that's.
But someone has to accept it for it to be delivered.
Either accepted or, if absolutely necessary, it can be posted. But presumably there would be someone responsible that would be accepting the
like
service.
You would take it to their house and they're never there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I expect there's a point at which they literally would post it on the door if necessary. But
We understand after the third attempt, then it is posted.
Yeah.
We also post the property itself.
An additional benefit of service is the person that's serving verifies the document that was served. We've had issue where they deny receiving in the envelope what we placed in the envelope.
So that, in an extreme example, if both were out of the country for 3 months, this hearing would still proceed on March 16th, I forget where I saw it.
Yeah, March 16th.
Yes. Now, I think if we had actual notice of that circumstance, we would have obligation to go take further steps. But absent any actual knowledge of that sort of extenuating circumstance, it would go forward.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone from the public care to comment on this? Historic property? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption resolution number 15-7172, rescheduling the date for a public hearing to consider whether a certain structure shall be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired.
Second.
Motion and second to adopt resolution number 15-7172. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think we need to set the date. Would that be correct?
It is
February
set,
20?
I think, isn't it? March?
In the motion for,
The resolution sets the date.
Sets the
So
date.
pass the
I mean, if we're
resolution will
postponing
set the
this
date.
and setting a date, I mean, didn't we already set a date? Are we
Yeah,
extending that date?
Resolution 157172 has a new date of March 16th.
March 16th,
Okay.
yeah.
I think we need to do that. Have that, if we can have that in the motion.
Okay.
That's fine with me. Ordered demolished or repaired with the hearing date set for March 16, 2015.
I'll second that.
Still the same second? Okay. So again, adopting resolution number 15-7172 with the understood date of March 16th, 2015 as the public hearing. Is that correct? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. That takes us on to development business.
Item 8.1, resolution number 15-7174, expressing support for a proposal to use low-income tax credits to partially fund the redevelopment of the Lee Building for a proposed 48-unit housing project.
Mr. Hobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, Commissioners, we bring back to you a resolution of support and a request for a resolution of support today on behalf of the owner, Mike Forrestall, and the Lee Building, as well as the Flint Hills Holding Group, LLC. If you remember, approximately a month ago, Mr. Forrestall brought to our attention that he'd like to have an affirmation of support for a low-income housing tax credit program that is supposed to be submitted by February the 6th of this year. Happens to be this coming Friday at 5:00 p.m. You sent us back to work with Mr. Forrestall on a proposed developer to work in that project for redevelopment of that facility. We have completed that, and Mr. Forrestall brought to us Flint Hills Holdings Group, LLC, out of Lawrence, Kansas, who is very interested in moving forward with a low-income housing tax credit program for the 2015 tax credit year. This past week, there was 3 commissioners and 3 staff members who traveled with us down to Lawrence, Kansas, to see a similar program that is being produced and worked on in the Lawrence, Kansas area. It's actually called the Polar Building, and it's on the east side of Lawrence area. And Mr. Kirschnick and his Flint Hills Holding Group have taken hold of a building that was in very bad disrepair, probably worse than the building we're talking about, the Lee Building here in Salina, Kansas. There was a couple of the floor roofs that had been fallen into the floor below it. They have rebuilt the building. They're using low-income tax credits to supply housing to low-income or rent-restricted or income-restricted tenants, as well as some market-rate apartments. Our project today here in the Lee Building here in Salina will be very similar to the artist workspace. It's actually artist live space and rent income qualified housing units. We will have approximately 90% of our units that will be in the rent qualified area. We'll have 10% of those apartments will be in the market rate income area. So we have a 90-10 split. A little bit different than it is down at the Lawrence, Kansas in the Polar Building. After staff toured the Polar Building, you have to see some of the pictures on the screen of the interior portion of that Polar Building. You'll see it is a very industrially designed and it's finished shape. There are actually the floors are polished concrete. You have open beam trusses in the ceilings. You have a nice kitchen area, a living area, 1 or 2 bedrooms, and 1 or 2 bathrooms, depending on the apartments. The exact number of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments for the Lee Building has not been specified at this particular time, but they will work through the developers to complete that process. Once we toured the Polar Building, we went to several other buildings that Flint Hills Holding Group is actually working on, the Cider Gallery, as well as Seedco, the offices of the Flint Hills Holding Group. We also went to an annex where it's actually an artist workspace building. We also toured 9 Dells, which is another income restricted housing unit. And we were very impressed with what we saw in the Lawrence area. The 3 commissioners that went with us probably will have some discussions with you today about that project. So on that behalf, we had received a letter from Tony Kirschnick from the Flint Hills Holding Group, LLC, requesting a resolution of support from our city, the city commissioners, on behalf of Flint Hills as they supply Kansas Housing Resources Corporation a a low-income housing tax credit request for application on this Friday. We feel like this will be a great opportunity for our community in the Lee Building. It's very interesting, the process that Flint Hills uses to actually work on the structures as well as get the structures rented. We understand that the Polar Building was leased, totally rented within a 3-hour period of time once it hit the market. Not that we can anticipate that happening here in Salina, but we would like to have a very fast possible relate a full, as soon as possible with this project. Because it also includes, if we received a letter of intent to sell from Mr. Forrestal, who happens to be in the audience today, on behalf of Flint Hills, a series of buildings in the 200 block of North Santa Fe and some vacant properties as well. So there is a possibility that this property complex, once it's been filled, could expand into other areas other in that 200 block area of North Santa Fe. Very pleased to submit to you a resolution of support for a low-income housing tax credit program on behalf of Flint Hills Holding Group, LLC, and the owners of the structure, the Lee Building, Mr. Mike Forrestal, and would ask for your letter or your support today through passage of Resolution 15-7174. I'll be more than glad to stand for any questions. You have on the screen also, with this project is in a neighborhood revitalization area. Also have the letter of intent to sell on behalf of Mr. Forrestal to the Flint Hills Holding Group, which we feel like is very beneficial to us. I'll be more than glad to stand for any questions. The staff would also as well.
Great,
Gary,
thank you.
real quick clarification, if I might. I want to make sure we're clear on how this resolution's drafted. In the first whereas, it mentions the development of 48 low to moderate income housing units, and then in the second whereas, it again mentions 48. But if it's 90-10, that would either be 4 or 5 units, depending on how you want to round, would be market rate.
That would be correct.
Should that be clarified in the resolution?
We can do that if you wish to do that. That's not a problem. We do not know exactly the number of units. It'll be 48 or 49 or 47 units. And so that's what they have told us. It'll be approximately 48 units at a 90-10 rate.
Could use a percentage.
Yeah, that's a good point. My question is if the commissioners should approve the resolution supporting the project, should the resolution be more specific as to it could be a percentage, the 90-10, versus trying to specify the number of units?
That would not be a problem at all if you wish to do that. Because we do know that it will be not less than a 90-10 in order to make the project work.
Right. So that's probably a question for you from a policy perspective, but if it's your desire to make sure you have that as part of your recommendation, we will need you need to communicate that, and we can update the resolution for you.
Okay. Beyond that, any questions then for staff?
Yeah, just kind of staying on that with the resolution. I'm looking for it here because I kind of referenced back to the Kansas Resource Housing document for this program, looking for the amenities because it does. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just looking on the whereas that mentions the amenities, and I seem to recall those being things like laundry facilities and bike racks and things like that, not so much one and 2 bedroom units, full complement of appliances. I'm just kind of looking at that. I apologize, I should have bookmarked this thing because if you know what I'm talking about, it has an amenities section to this. It lists the certain amenities. Correct. Do we know if that, because it is a requirement on the from the state, itself. But there's about 6 or 7 different things that we're looking for, and one of them is that it has amenities tied to that. I don't know if we need to list those or if that matters. Any thought on that, Mike?
Well, part of the difficulty is if you look at the Flint Hills Holdings correspondence dated January 29th, that was in response to our request for a letter of intent identifying the details. And so staff doesn't have specifics to add to the resolution. The second paragraph points out that or states at least, that it is customary for development details to evolve after submission of the application, but the scope intends to include, and then it goes on to describe the units. The developers have yet to provide us the level of detail that you're referring to.
Okay. I guess there are certain assumptions we're going to have to.
Well, is that level of detail, should we expect that to be in the application to the state, Mike? Do you know?
I believe so.
If so, you have a couple choices. You can wing it a little bit if you feel that you'd like to list those as part of the resolution. again, just simply communicating, it doesn't create a binding situation, but it communicates your interest to what you're really supporting to the state agency that approves the tax credits. Another way, and I'd have to talk with these guys, I'd have to ask them about the timing, is obviously we have Friday at 5 as the deadline, so that would prompt the question of a special meeting so that we could get the app in hand and then update the resolution for you, postpone it to a particular day and time, and call a special meeting to address this. So there's a couple ways, or as it is.
Just to clarify, I don't believe that it's the developer's intention to have that level of detail by the submission deadline, that they intend to provide it after the submission deadline?
Well, and I'm fine with going with having seen those in person, and that I think that was a big part of their overall package to begin with. Did they have the laundry, common laundry? They didn't have laundry hookups in the units.
They just had
okay.
Yeah.
A laundry room.
And I know that was one of the amenities, and it was both ways, either common laundry facilities or hookups.
John,
So,
I might tell you, I've had conversations with them. Okay, yes, they intend to have a common laundry, but granted, most all the apartments will have hookups for washers and dryers. Okay, but they also will have to have a meeting room. They will have to, that's available for their residents. They will have to have some green space. Okay, and in a lot of these places, they also have to have an exercise facility of some type for these people. So those are the typical common things. Plus, they also have to have handicapped access and all the things that the city requires as well.
right.
And then some of those things will be required by the state. And sometimes they're also shown in a second phase, because we also intend to do 3 phases, because we cannot get all the tax credits at one time for all the buildings. The state will not allocate all those tax credits to one large project. They want to spread them around the state. So they'll give them tax credits for one small project, and they'll show some of those amenities in the first one, and then some of them in the second one, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Okay?
Great, thank you.
Real quick, Mayor, if I may, it kind of may prompt a question, something Mr. Forrestal said. I think I know the answer, but it might be good to clarify if I may. And my question, you were talking about, you said and you mentioned the 3 phases. Is it your intent at this point to sell the full, all this, we look at the buildings?
It's my intent to sell it as a package, because I know in order for them to go to the state, they have to show that they have enough available parking. Okay, now they're going to want to do it in 3 phases, and typically when they buy it, they want to pay for it in 3 phases, because they make their money on a per phase and what they can borrow. So typically they'll pay the majority of it up front, and then incrementally as they do each phase.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So any questions for staff?
I just wanted to say that, Mr. Hobby, that I'm sorry that I didn't get to attend. I really am interested in housing, and I support this project. I just wish there is still so much stigma attached when you say low-income housing out there, discrimination against folks who may need lower housing. And I wish we could get to the place where we call this affordable housing, because that's really what this will be. It's not, to me, it's not low-income housing, it's affordable housing. And I know that's, of course, what the state, I suppose the state statute defines as low-income housing. But I support that. And I did see, of course, the pictures of the project in Lawrence, and Commissioner Hardy showed me some pictures also on his phone. Looked pretty nice to me. So I support it.
And just to support your thoughts there on the affordable housing, I did find in the back of the packet that was in the original submittal, just by way of example, there's the market rate for a 2-bedroom apartment in Salina for 2015 is $694. And just going from the numbers that they gave us in Lawrence, based on, Lawrence and those numbers are probably, I think, $850 or something. The Section 42 affordable housing numbers takes that rent from, I think, a typical single person, which would be sort of the highest rate that you would have, takes that down maybe about 20 to 25%. So instead of $695 for that unit, it's probably $500 or something about. So it's not like it's somebody's living there for $100.
That is correct. Lawrence's actual rate for the single bedroom is $540. Their advertised rate is $540 for an income qualified tenant.
Okay.
And I hope that people understand that's what this is about. It's an affordable housing.
Well, and we have two different housing subsidies. Basically, one is a Section 8, and this is not Section 8. This is Section
tax credit.
42. This is not the vouchers and so on. This is a completely different.
Clearly, you're right. The federal phrase is low income, but clearly the application, when we look at our market rents and these rents, both what market could be, and using the Lawrence example, what the rents for the tax credit units would be, it's truly affordable. It's not low income by any means, because what they're charging for a tax credit unit, one bedroom in Lawrence, is equivalent of a 2-bedroom market rate in our community, and that's based on an older study, but it's not going to be that much different. So it truly isn't going to be what we would envision as low income. It's truly affordable.
Right. And I found the amenities, and I bring these up just to kind of almost support your comments as well. And these are some of the things that will come along with this project that the state is going to require amenities, and they are things such as organized recreational activities, green area, bike racks, security landscaping, washer-dryer hookups, outdoor uncovered seating and benches, picnic tables, garden areas. Just certain things like that they kind of bring in to enhance that the state's looking for these amenities to go along with this type of project to enhance not only the renters but the neighborhood. So I think it's something, when we look at downtown, it's something that they can be amenities that the residents would enjoy, but I think they would also add, they could be worked in to add to the streetscape and the environment downtown. So I look forward to seeing a little more detail on that, but I would anticipate, just judging from seeing the projects in Lawrence, that these definitely would be part of that program.
Yeah, I think, Commissioners, I just want to be sure that staff is clear, and I think you understand this, but we want to be clear that even if in this letter or in the resolution you said we want certain amenities, and you want to be very specific about whether it be cabinetry and countertops and flooring and blah, 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 you could go on and on. Even if you did that, the letter of credit is not the letter of recommendation or support through the resolution is not a binding document. It's not a contract. So at this stage, they just want to understand, state wants to know that the community is supportive of the project. It doesn't give us, as a city, any ability to leverage anything. So now what happens is if they go forward with the project and there's no need for any incentive, a program that the city has, and the tax credits are fine, then they go off and they don't need to come back to us, with the exception of the building permit type items, any land use, the regulatory stuff. If there's a need for any form or certain forms of incentives from us, and at that point, in most cases, you have the ability to then look more closely at to ensure the project quality, the trust but verify approach, if you should want to do that at that time. So I just want to be sure you understand the steps and the stages, and we'll see what happens after that. But hopefully we'll have the same quality project. I think after seeing the Polar Building in Lawrence, if we had that quality project in the Lee buildings here, we'd be very happy with that.
Mr. Forrest, if I could ask you one more question. What do you envision as the fix for the aesthetics of the south building not being developed, just for those living in the north building looking south, that space in between the buildings?
Well, that's all going to be decorated up, Trent. That's where your I don't want to say it, I won't call it a lobby, but it's just a work-live space for artists possibly, and that's just where you can create some lighting and probably some artistic things down there, and that's where your benches will be. Actually, if you look to the east end of that, an old loading dock that can be used for a stage. There's, to the east of that is an area where they'll probably take the concrete out, put the grass in, and if you saw the Polar Building, And knowing Mr. Kresnick, he'll probably put a golf green in there, because that's what he has in front of the Polar Building. So, you know, they do have to create some green space, and they will try to decorate it up, but that's just kind of a walkway through there that they can keep as a private area, even just for those residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment for staff and applicant and kind of everybody involved, because, you know, a month ago we had this thing, and you know, we didn't have a developer and we didn't have any sort of program or anything. So I appreciate that you work together with staff, and appreciate staff really going the extra mile to make this happen.
They did.
Because
excellent job.
Right. And so just to be clear, I mean, there's still a long way to go on this thing, obviously, but, you know, it sounds like we've got a clear recommendation from staff that we're comfortable with the level of detail now, that we can give this, just looking at the resolution, it looked pretty much exactly the same as the last one that we did, which was the Phase 2 of Hawthorne Place there. And so I appreciate that happening, but the main thing that's different now between then is that we've got identified a developer, and I think the level of this being an actual project is certainly sufficient enough for me to support this. So
sounds good. Well, thank you.
I would just say, similar to kind of what the vice mayor was saying, is that it was difficult a month ago to try and come up with a decision when there was no plan. It was just, I was commenting to people, I said, anybody that thinks the city isn't flexible, try going into most city commissions, say, I need you to give us a tentative thumbs up to a $16 million project, but I don't really have any plans. And the fact that you could even get before us with that, I think, is a pretty good testament that we're pretty willing to listen. Most cities would probably go, why, you know? But I am glad that we've narrowed it down. Definitely going and seeing the guys who developed the Polar was a big change for multiple reasons, and it kind of comes back, you know, whenever you make these decisions up here, it's difficult because there's a part of you that says, why do we need income qualified housing? You know what I mean? You wish that the city and our community had better paying jobs or had, you know, all of these things to where it really wasn't required. That's the first gut reaction. And then it being somebody who's a landlord and a property owner, you think about all the guys who have made investments and doing that. Now you're going to bring in, you know, 48, potentially 100 and some down the road, other taxpayer-supported housing. So I kind of get pulled both ways. There's part of me that says, is it fair to the people who've made the investment, on and on. But going down and visiting that project changed my views quite a bit, because it wasn't, I think he had a picture up there. I don't know, Mike, if you can bring that house picture up. the new house that was built behind, that's not part of the project, but is a direct result. The way I look at this, and what helps me maybe sleep at night and have an argument, this house here, I don't know if they'll flash to that for the at-home players or not, but basically, this area of Lawrence, for people who aren't familiar, and I was familiar with the area before because of Martin Logan speakers that used to be down that building, pretty much this whole area, maybe not some of the houses, was slated to just be bulldozed. I mean, this was like I think Mr. Hobby said, 2 of the roofs had fallen in on that building. I think on the cider building, the roof had fallen through into the basement. And they took an area of town that basically was potentially, I'm not going to say the worst part of Lawrence, but darn near. And it's not just the fact that they started with the Polar Building, but it's the stuff that's gone on around it, like this house here. This is a $400,000 house that someone has chose to move down, and this is right across the street and across the lot from the main Polar Building and the cider building, which is their art gallery. And what that shows me is people are willing to start investing their money around it. And one part of the plan, which was exciting for me, is they're going to do 12 condos, and this is not tax subsidized. These are 12 for sale condos that are going to be across the street on about a quarter block area, each one selling for $400,000. And that goes right back to where this commission has been all along, and that is increasing our density, reusing our areas of town. So within a quarter of a block, what is that? That's $4.8 million in taxable residential income in a quarter of a block. I don't know how many blocks we'd have to throw together in Salina, Kansas to get that. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in Salina, but the fact is it's a quality development that people want to start moving around. They want to start building around. They're building a brand new unit. They've got options on property around it. We saw houses that had basically, probably in the $40,000 range that people were buying, and adding 4,000 square foot additions onto the back. I mean, huge. And again, yeah, I'll get to that. It's all part of the big circle. That's right. Right there's a good example. That gentleman actually, before this product, took the front of that house, and you can't really see, but there's an entire addition on the back, and they were doing restaurant and lunches out there. But the building has all been completely redone. And again, these are areas of town that we're bringing in no money at all. And so now you've got a redevelopment happening down there. You've got money coming into this area of town. You've got people moving to town. And I agree. We met with an artist down there, Stan Hurd, and he was telling us, and I believe this. He said there are people who have moved back to Lawrence after living in San Francisco and New York or wherever else, and said, I wanted to come back because this is a cultural thing. Now, it's probably a little more artsy than maybe ours is going to be. But he also mentioned people are staying because it's the kind of development that they want to live in. So, and I think that's true. I mean, they had an art space with like about 20 or 30 stalls, and every single one of them was rented. They've got filmmakers down there who have had 2 films in Sundance, is that right, that we mentioned? So, I mean, it's just become a hotbed of activity, and as we look downtown, it was very important for me that the people who are taking the biggest risks downtown, people who have talked about hotels or talked about redevelopment, be on board with this, and from my understanding, they do support this. And I think that's important. So it jives with getting the population down there and not Section 8 income, where people probably don't have the kind of money, which is a concern of ours, to spend down there, but people who millennials. I mean, this is, when you look at study after study, this is where millennials want to live. Contrary to what we've been told in here before by people who have brought us studies from 1994 and said, no, really, they want to live in suburban type houses. This is where today young professionals want to live, the kind of town that we're trying to create with entrepreneurs, people who have ideas and who are going to be our next Vortexes and our next Tonys and our next Crestwood and our trailer, who our trailer company was today, whatever they were called. But these are the people we want to get together and have those common areas and create a better community. And I think it just fits, like I said, right in with where we're trying to go with the community. And it was really impressive to see what they'd done. And the developers, the 2 guys we met with, it was just, it's what they do. It wasn't a sense of, oh, we're making a ton of money. It wasn't anything. It was just like, we like doing these things. I think this is their sixth project. So it really, they really sold it well by what they've done. It's not just a bunch of words. They didn't come up and say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. It was done. You went there, and it was happening before your eyes. It wasn't just this one project. It expanded. So I think, my opinion, obviously, from a month ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever, has definitely changed a lot more in support of this. And like I said, knowing that our downtown partners are on board with it and want to see it happen, really makes it a lot more palatable, and I hope it does turn into multiple phases, and I hope other people do start investing in, maybe they sell the 3rd building for townhouses. Who knows? I mean, maybe there's an investment opportunity for people. I know two of the commissioners up here have talked about they'd love to have a loft downtown, and if they fill all 3 of these buildings, there won't be many left down there. So, I may get tired of paying somebody to mow my lawn. You guys might get tired of mowing your lawn. I pay somebody, but it'd be the kind of place I'd love to live too. But like I said, it may start off as a little bit market of this kind of tax credit type housing, but it may grow into something much, much bigger. And I look forward to the whole project coming to completion sooner than later. So appreciate it.
Part of the project here that is not shown is the proximity of the project, the Polar Building, to railroad tracks. And actually, it was such a challenging site to build on or to redevelop. And the developer said, you know what, the people that live here pay extra for the train whistle. They love it. And they also, the other thing that was not brought out is that they currently have 200 people on their waiting list to move into these units because they enjoy them so much. And finally, the other part I thought was interesting, he said not everybody is happy about our development. He said there's probably 2% of the people out there that complain, and their chief complaint is, my property values are now rising. Mm-hmm. And That's the complaint.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit, and I heard, and you know, it's funny, I heard somebody say that the other day. I heard a guy was talking about selling his house, and he says, well, don't fix it up because they'll raise your property taxes. I thought, gosh, what a, you know, I know if I had a $40,000 house and it went up to $200,000 and somebody was willing to give me $100 for it, I'd probably be pretty happy because that extra $150 or $200 a year in property tax takes a long time to make that gap up, you know. So, and I think he was saying that was his chief complaint. It was gentrification and everything else they were talking about. So, I mean, they thought, and I thought, yeah. But you're right. That was their only complaint they heard. So, any other comments? Okay, anyone from the public? Sure.
First off, that extra $100,000 in values is about an extra $1,000 in taxes, not $150 a year.
Okay.
I want to start out my comments by clearly stating I support this. I think tax increment financing, low-income tax credits are about the only way affordable housing can get built in America today because most people can't afford the rent it'd take otherwise. My only concern is that too often local builders and developers are told that they will have to follow all the minimum building codes and code issues while these same rules and codes are often quickly abridged or changed for out-of-town developers. My biggest concern today is that the playing field stay even, and in particular to minimum parking requirements for the proposed housing rehab of the old Lee building. I looked at this structure a number of years ago, and we couldn't figure out a way to get more than 30 units in and meet the minimum parking requirements. Now, it sounds like maybe additional grounds being made available and that issue's being addressed. But parking at housing, in particular apartment housing, is usually critically short, even with the minimum code. One-bedroom units today often have 2 or more occupants, and often with both of those occupants needing parking space. So a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit is really too minimal in a lot of cases, because not only do the apartment complex totally fill it and overrun onto adjacent parking, but there's no place for visitors to park. Commercial buildings are extremely difficult to rehab and meet fire code standards and requirements. That's a safety issue. I'm not saying it can't be done or won't be done. One of the things that seems to be apparent is that this developer seems to be an above-average quality developer for this type of housing unit. And that's a plus, a real plus. One of the photos you showed touches on another issue that's real important to me. And I don't know if you noticed, the parking behind one of those units she was bragging on was gravel parking.
Yeah,
not hard paid parking.
I don't think there was any. I don't think it was part of.
No, but I'm talking about on a different issue for the city, and your potential changes away from gravel parking for residential properties in the community.
Yeah,
and that was in a unit $400,000 home, which shows gravel has a place.
No, that's the backyard. That was the backyard that you saw. It was, just because we were there, I think there was a drive in the front. But yeah.
Just trying to point out that gravel parking's being accepted in other communities in housing areas.
But maybe Delphus or something.
Again, this sounds like a good quality project that will be a boon to downtown Salina if the minimums or minimums plus are met so that it stays a quality unit, because too often developers, maybe not these developers, but other developers, take all their profit out to start with, and then they run and they don't care what happens after that. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Yeah, I think everybody will remember from before.
Norman Mantle, West Pleasant Hill Road again. It's a tax subsidy. You're asking the taxpayers to subsidize a private individual who's making money. That's wrong. I don't think you're looking 20 years down the road, and it isn't going to take that long. Our resources are going down the river. We're not going to have water in 5 years. If you look at the Ogallala Aquifer, it's going to be depleted real quick. Now they're trying to build a canal from northeast Kansas. It's going to take $25 billion to build it. 25 foot deep, 248 foot wide.
I thought it was in the billions. I didn't think it was 25 million. It sounds like a bargain.
It's in an agriculture magazine, isn't it, Jason?
It was 20 whatever billion is what
Yeah,
the number
billion.
was, right?
Not million.
I said billion.
25 million, you can't pave a parking lot.
I said billion. Well, okay.
It seems,
it's
that's
gonna
why
t-
we use gravel.
It's
Yeah.
going to take $1 billion a year just to operate that.
Yeah.
And you're going to get fights over this water.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to stop it. The Americans are going to stop it. The tribal people are going to stop this water, moving it from one place to the other. You better accept the risk, what it is. So, long term, you're going to be sitting here with a white elephant. You've already got one on the north side of town, that motel. Do something with that first. There's other avenues to go to besides taking up my tax money.
Okay. Okay, thank you. One thing I would point out from previously is I don't think, I could be mistaken, but I don't think we have a policy where we treat our local contractors any differently than we treat out-of-town contractors. I would just want to point that out. Now, one thing that we have discussed in the past, had nothing to do with this project, is looking at how our codes apply to our older areas of town. As we decide that we would like people to redevelop those, we understand that there are some lot limitations, some things like that, and we would look at that, but not for just out-of-town developers. That would be for anybody who chose to move into our redeveloped areas. I don't know how formally we've had these discussions, but I think it's been, we understand the limitations of building older areas of town, but.
Commissioners, we have a model development review team process that's we've presented on, or folks have presented on at the Kansas League of Cities Conference, and written articles on and so forth. And our process, our codes, there are processes for certain exceptions based on, it depends if it's a zoning code. You can find that process in our zoning code. If it's in a building code, and there's different approaches and materials and so forth to accomplish the same thing that's in there. We do apply that consistently, whether in town or out of town. Doesn't make a difference at all. One thing too I would like to add is, and I can't speak to the value judgment that some might have with regards to the use of tax dollars into a project to stimulate a project. But coming back to the water, I would say that if there are folks that would otherwise be in those single-family ranch houses where they have grass to irrigate and so forth, you're probably better off putting them in a large existing building.
Oh, for sure.
Because they'll use less in the long term in that situation. So long term, that's actually a water conservation approach, versus a greenfield type situation. So
Yeah,
I
I
think there's
agree.
long-term benefits that way.
And I don't disagree. It is difficult. I mean, trust me, it's easy. I mean, it's re-election time. I could sit up here and know that this is going to be supported and say, I'm not supporting any tax subsidized thing. It's easy to sit there and run on a campaign of I'm not going to spend taxpayers' dollars, but the truth of the matter is when you're up here, you realize every single thing. I mean, there are probably a few people in the world who absolutely receive no subsidies. It might be me. I might be one of them. But if it's not a free and reduced lunch, if it's not a business, I mean, our governor's doing it. I mean, talk about what the governor's doing. I mean, changing tax bases, and we're not going to get a big discussion about it, but I mean, I hate to say that it's the way business is done, and I wish it would change. And I think there's some legislation out there that is looking at making that more transparent. So hopefully it does begin to lessen as time goes on. But big projects like this, that's just kind of the way it has to be. I don't think anybody's going to come up with $9.5 million to invest off the bat like that. It's done through tax credits, and I think hasn't been a unit larger than 4 in Salina built since when that hasn't used some form of subsidized housing. 1986, I think is the number I heard.
Yeah.
So any unit larger than 4 has had some form of subsidy of something. Again,
Yeah, no question, housing has probably outpaced the income growth in the country over the last X number of years.
Right. And I think it's a good thing that we have expensive housing in Salina. Like I said, we'd like to get our wages up there, but I think it goes to the fact that we've got a pretty diverse economy. I've mentioned this before, and I think it has kept there are towns our size that houses are a lot cheaper, and that's true. You can go live in those towns, but they're probably not going to have near the amenities. They're not going to have some of the things that we've got going. And when you go to sell your house, you're pretty happy that your rates have stayed high. Sucks to pay taxes on them, but when you sell your house and it actually has a value, that's kind of a nice thing. So.
Yeah, and I think if you combine that with the quality of finishes you expect to get based on what you've seen, and we recognize it really isn't low, it is truly affordable, and so the incomes are high enough to be in units that are pretty nice units and also to contribute to the economy of the downtown. All of those fit the mission and the vision and the goals, strategic goals of this organization right now. So if the project that comes out of that, if it happens and it's exactly as we expect, it'll be a real positive from a lot of perspectives. So this is the first step.
things are happening. I mean, this is the first of many steps. I mean, we're looking at 10 or 15 years, but I think it's getting into the kind of community that people really, I mean, not that Salina hasn't always been a great place. It has been, but I think it can be a better place, and I think we're headed down that road. And I think the fact that you've reached out and found people to do this, and I know our own art director in the back has lived in the Polar Building. You can testify to and when she came to town, I only because I'm on another board, I know that she's moved into another loft that's been changed. So young people like this kind of living. This is what they want, and we constantly, no matter where we go, people are saying, what do young people want? How do we keep young people to stay in town? And these are the kind of things that are going to do it. And millennials, again, I looked at the Dell study that was just released a couple of weeks ago. They look at where they want to live first, then they worry about a job. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what they're doing. And so we want them to pick this place to live, and we want them to bring their bright ideas and their energy and come to our community and enhance it. So I appreciate, like I said, that we settled on this. I didn't know the other groups, but I'm perfectly happy with these guys. They were pretty impressive. So, sure. Yeah.
I might answer a couple questions one of the gentlemen brought up. Okay, we talked about fire safety. I'm sure the city addresses that. This will have to be a sprinkled job, so it'll have to have fire safety put into it. Now, I'm also selling enough property around it to be able to park 140 cars. Now, the most you can get in those buildings is 120 apartments. Then there's also an option across the street next to the Rendezvous for another 20 cars. And if that's not enough, I own 2 acres on the east side of the post office. So there's enough for another 200 cars. So as to worry about enough parking around it, either as a residential or commercial development, there's plenty of parking available to it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the Polar people, and maybe Jason or Mike might remember, one of the guys here that went, I think they actually were not required to do a full one-to-one, but they actually ended up being, they were able to actually get in one-to-one. Didn't the city kind of look at the...
Yeah, I can't recall exactly what the Lawrence requirement was, but I think that's correct.
It seemed like it was less than actually a one,
yes, it is.
one per unit.
I
Yeah.
spoke with Dean Andrews about it. If we were able to get 125 cars or apartments in the Lee Building, we would only need 100 cars based on our statutes today.
Yeah.
But there is enough there for 140 to 160 within its proximity, and then additional.
Yeah, and that was what they were saying. That he said, look, we found a way to get one-to-one, even though it wasn't required by the city of Lawrence. It sounds like ours isn't either. So, and again, the idea is a complete downtown where some of these people may not have to even have automobiles, and some of the people there obviously didn't in the Polar Building. Yeah.
Well, I talked to Pat Walarius years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we talked about developing the Lee Departments, and he said that he would put a bus stop in there.
Right.
So I'm sure if there's a bus stop, a lot of people would probably try to use that as well. So
Yeah, what a concept.
Right.
Yeah. Well, again, as we, it's coming back, Jason. You're right. It's coming back, this 360. I know we're talking a lot about this. It's not just about this building. It's an opportunity to praise ourselves for what we've been working on. And that is a concept of recent studies show that I think it's 40% of a family's income will go into their automobile, between a payment, between insurance, property tax, gas, maintenance, all those things. That's hard for most of us to believe. But when we look at our income levels and think about what a car payment is and what all that costs, it's not real hard to all of a sudden realize, yeah, you're right, that is 40% of their income. What a concept if they could take a bus and get to work, or go around, or take their bike and be a little bit more connected and save that money and use that money to buy more goods and services in our town and up our base. Those crazy commissioners, what are they thinking?
It just it means that we need to think differently.
That's right.
Than we have for years.
That's never been a problem for me.
Another thing just came to mind too is along with the transportation, we saw quite a few bicycles that were chained to fences or whatever while we were there. I've just recently thought that we have a greater need for a bike sharing program, and this might be one of those opportunities to. We have a lot of people in a single place to have some sort of bike depot. It could be in conjunction with OCCK2, with City Go as well, that would have bicycles available for people that want to run around the corner to save a lot, buy their groceries, and come back. That sort of thing.
Which, by the way, is looking great to save a lot. So, see, it's just a whole platform here.
I would agree with you about.
Oh, yeah, you got to tell everybody at home. We know you, but nobody at home does.
Yeah, I'm Grace Peterson. I'm the visual arts coordinator for the city, but I am a former resident of the Polar Building and got there. I was one of the first residents, and I moved there in an effort to help renovate an artist studio space, because that was an area that is full of creative people, and I wanted to be around other creative people. And the Polar Building, boy, I needed an apartment pretty quickly. I was getting a divorce, and I rented it sight unseen, and when I walked in, I was like, are you kidding? This is... I needed some subsidized housing. I needed an affordable place for my son and I to live. I worked at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. I also worked at Van Gogh in Lawrence, which is a great arts organization, and I also worked at the Lawrence Art Center. So I had 3 jobs, was working really hard, but still was able to qualify. So I was lower income, but a lot of those people that are in that building were holding great jobs, but still, you know, chose a life in the arts, which you make some concessions, and especially if you're an educator and you've chosen to go into the arts, like a double vow of poverty. But it's still a life that I chose because it was really important to me. And having the Polar, having that place to live and seeing all of the activity that came about from, well, the residents got together. We got together and did things together and helped with kind of the visioning of what that place could be. The cider gallery was, when I first saw it years ago, actually Tony had brought me through there, and the roof was collapsed. I was like, how is this guy going to possibly do this? And it is a beautiful space and a wonderful gallery where a lot of people gather, and a great event space. The activity around that area is something that draws people to it, for sure. It's proximity to downtown allowed me to ride my bike everywhere. I love that there is going to be bike lanes down Iron. I love that the grocery store is going to be there pretty soon. And one of the reasons I moved here was because I was going to be able to find a place downtown. It was really important to me. I'm one of those people who would rather not drive. I have a car, but all the things that I needed were either coming or were there already. I spend 90% of my money downtown right now. I would love to see more restaurants downtown so that I get a few more options. But I'm a huge supporter of the Polar Building. It was a great place for me. I had a studio in the basement, which allowed me to work on my art as well as live and teach and take care of my son, and it was a great place. As far as parking goes, I think most everybody in the Polar did have a car, but most of us didn't use it. And that space down there, you guys have seen that area. So you've got the cider building having a wedding, all the residents parking, and then Seedco, there was still parking. I mean, you might have to kind of drive around a little bit to get it, but there was plenty of parking down there. So anyway.
Yeah, great. Well, it's nice to hear. I mean, nice to hear from a resident. I mean, who lived there. So that's great.
Yeah.
And I think we also left out, I don't know how many awards they won from national, local. I mean, there was 3 or 4 of them that they won, and deserved so. I mean, when you see that, the area you were talking about where they did the weddings, that green space there, I think kind of, they said won something between that
I
and
love the putting
cider.
green, too. I know you made fun of it, but it was a lot of fun.
They said it gets used a lot. Yeah, they did.
It does.
Yeah. And there was barbecue grills, and I think, trying to remember what else was, there was quite a bit of stuff there. Room with a pool, nice pool table, not just some, you know, afterthought like $3.99.
It had a big screen TV, and we'd get down there and have potlucks, and it was a great place to live. Yeah.
Great.
The electric car charging station.
Right. We won't talk about how it got used, but it did
know-
win them an award.
didn't know
It did
anybody
win
with
them an
electric
award.
cars,
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Please. Yeah. Just give us your name and address for the at-home people.
Thomas Duggar, 111 North, Wisconsin, apartment 103.
Great.
I remember John from the last time I spoke here about 2 years ago. I mentioned a project that I was thinking about doing, and In the discussions, what came up was the old Union Pacific Railroad station. Within 3 weeks, I will be putting to the property manager in Omaha that handles all of Kansas a 60-page plus proposal for them to donate it to Salina, and so I can turn it into a railroad museum. I've already emailed him to put him on notice that it's going to be coming. I am working 12 to 15 hours a day on the project. I will have a huge proposal including artist renderings of what it's going to look like. It's going to include both past, present, and future railroad. So it'll have old locomotives, current locomotives, a replica of a bullet train, all next to each other outside the museum. I'm going to ask them to donate the depot and all their unused property that has abandoned or partially used tracks from the depot out west into the county for the project. I'm expecting that I will need in total $4 to $5 million to do the project. With the donation of the property and the land, I will have enough going to put the proposal to Topeka for 1, historic register, and 2, like 3 organizations in Topeka that have grant money, all of which require dollar-for-dollar donation to get the money. From that, I'm expecting to get at least $500,000 from the surrounding area in donations to match up with the $500,000 from grants to get $1 million to start the project. That's going to be also a requirement that I'm going to put on myself for Union Pacific to donate the property. I have to raise $1 million on my own in order for them to donate the property.
Back to you. Have they formally kind of decided to get rid of that building yet?
No.
Not yet?
I know they use the parking lot. They use a tiny portion of the building. They have all their utility trucks and that stuff that does repairs on the line and all that stuff outside that. There's adequate space to the east to move all that up. I'll even pay to put them in a brand new parking lot across the street. There's also a piece of land on the north side that they own that's unused. I plan on putting a parking lot there, putting a pedestrian walkway over the tracks, including elevators on both sides for handicap. So it'll be 100% handicapped accessible. That should be enough incentive for them to go forward and donate it. I do not expect rejection, but they may drag their feet for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but eventually I expect them to relent and say, this is a great idea. It'll add value to Salina and be a positive, what do I call it? A positive public relations item for them to present to other people. I know, in fact, I've talked to the Orphan Train Center curator in Concordia. She has already agreed to be on my board of directors without me even having started the nonprofit organization to do this project, which I will have started before the end of the month. But she's already agreed, after talking to her for 1 hour, to be on my board of directors. I hadn't planned on saying anything to you guys until after my proposal was submitted to UP in Omaha and had gotten an initial response. But I was getting maps from the map department for my proposal to send to them. The door was open when I walked by, sat down. I said, why not now?
Well, it does somewhat tie into what the redevelopment downtown.
Redevelopment. It will generate, it will create jobs, permanent, good-paying jobs, construction on the remodeling of the building, post-finish of it. It will generate hotel tax from the people coming to see the museum. So it is will be a huge tax for you guys to spend, generator.
Well, I'd say keep us posted on anything you find out, because, we definitely
I will keep you posted on it as things go on. I will let you know when I submit it. I will let you know any communications I have with UP in Omaha. There's one individual that handles multiple states' property, one of which is Kansas. He's now got it in his inbox, whether he has seen it yet or not. I've mailed it, sent it out Sunday. He may not even be in the office for the next week or two. But within 3 weeks, they will have received in U.S. mail my 40 to 70 page proposal with artist renderings. I'll use K-State Salina students or Kansas Wesleyan students to have full artist renderings of what it's going to look like when it's finished.
Okay. Well, let us know, and then
I will keep you posted.
Okay, great.
And you've already given me a potential curator.
She works for us. Wait.
I will steal her away from you guys on a separate project I have in Lindsborg.
Yeah.
That is smaller than this one.
Well, I think John and I were just looking at some old literature, and there had been actually plans way back when in 1916 for a linear park over there. I don't remember what it was going to be, like Union Station Park or something obvious like that. But anyway, definitely, let us know.
I have another project. Unfortunately, the property in Lindsborg will not go up for property tax sale because the owner in China has not paid taxes on it for over 2 years and has been unresponsive. That is my other project. That's my 2 projects, Union Pacific and one in Lindsborg.
Okay, well, like I said, keep us posted and let us know what develops with it.
It's the one in Lindsborg that I want to steal her away from.
Over there? Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
And I got my business card to give it to her.
There you go. She snuck out. Thanks. Anyone else on this project? Okay. Seeing none, we'll bring it back for any further discussion or possible action.
Just real quick, before a motion is made on this, what would be back to talking about the 90%, 10% split and making sure that is in the language of the resolution? Would that be just an appropriate place to put that just right after? Whereas the 48 dwelling units will have affordable rents targeted to individuals and families with low to moderate incomes, comma, with a split of 90% subsidized, 10% market rate. Would that be? How's the best way to get this into the motion so that we can get that into the resolution?
Looks like Greg may have a thought. I would think a modification of possibly the second whereas. The second whereas indicates that 48 dwelling units will have affordable rents targeted to individuals and families with low to moderate incomes. And
Can we make a statement of not less than
I'd say
10%?
not more than 90%.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
where you want to be on that, but it looks like the 90-10 is what's going to be requested.
Right.
It looks
Yeah.
like
But you
that.
could-
So if you wanted not more than,
Put a
Not more
that's
than.
fine.
Yeah, sure, we'll take it at
I'd defer to Greg on some
20%.
language thoughts there.
We're not going to limit them.
How about a minimum of 10% market rate?
Minimum or maximum?
I'd say
Minimum.
Minimum rate of minimum 10% market rate.
that works too. Going from the other direction.
Okay. And then just to kind of, have you closed the, is this just?
Yeah,
up for
we'll close
discussion?
out the public session so we can
Okay.
just go back and,
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to kind of wrap some of this up, and just for informational purposes too. Couple of comments that were made, and I appreciate the public comment on this. As far as one of the requirements in this, which is actually kind of nice and it fits in, and I'll use your 360 there. A lot of the other things that we've been taking a look at doing on this, and one of those is there is a requirement that since this is a rehabilitation of an existing structure, that there be an audit done on this unit with the qualified rater, and we're talking energy efficiency aspects to this particular low-income housing tax credit component, and that is that it's got to meet certain stipulations of the 2006 International Energy Efficiency Code, which is one of the things that we've been looking at as a community of trying to help integrate into what we're doing. So, and basically on this, it doesn't have to meet any specified standard, but it has to meet a standard that the rater, the developer, and let's see, and the KHRC, the three of them come up and determine what kind of standard needs to be met when this thing is finally constructed, so that there's not, they recognize that we're dealing with an older structure, and so there are certain things that are going to be able to be more energy efficient and so on. If this were a new building, it would need to meet a standard of 100, which means that their HERS rating would have to be in line with the 2006 Energy Code. So there are certain things in there that we don't currently require from a local building code standpoint, but it will be required of this because it is a state program and so on. So there are certain things that I think that we all will eventually embrace, but we don't currently. But on this particular thing, we have to, and so as part of this program. And then the other thing is the parking. And there's a lot of talk about the different requirements for parking, and I think a lot of it goes to the current parking requirements for multifamily housing are such because, quite frankly, most of that development is taking place in greenfield development or out south or east or wherever, further removed from town. And quite frankly, you need an automobile to get anywhere you need to go. And if you have more than one person in that house, generally most people have one vehicle per driving adult. And so a lot of the function of parking is due not so much to the use, and that use being multifamily. A lot of that has to do with the function that you need a car to get just about anywhere you need to go. One of the nice things, and I think what redeveloping in the core of the community, where you have access not only to a lot of services that are already there that might not make it necessary for you to drive your car everywhere, but you have access to parking lots that are used during the day that might not be used during the evening hours. And so you have an awful lot more opportunity for shared parking, which is a concept that's being embraced everywhere, because you don't want to have to build and maintain parking lots everywhere, and a lot of times you don't have to. And it's one of the benefits of having a development downtown where you have a lot of existing parking to begin with. And people will park once, and if you have guests, they might park a block from your home and stop in at a store before they grab a dessert or something and bring to you, or a bottle of wine or something else, and bring to you. So there are other things, that guest parking and so on, is something that, well, if you live downtown, your guests are sometimes going to be doing other things downtown too. So that's an added benefit for not having to spend all that money developing this property on parking spaces. So you can put that into the building and other amenities. So that's really nice. And then just one other thing on parking is that, just to kind of put it into perspective downtown, back in about 1987, there was a thought that, boy, we really need to tear down that Steeple Theater so we can get more parking downtown. And I think we lose sight of the fact that we have the Steeple Theater thanks to a 3-2 vote. It was that close. Two commissioners thought that we needed a parking lot more than we needed a Steeple Theater. We don't have a parking problem. It would be great to have parking problems downtown, because that would mean that everybody wants to be downtown and are fighting for a place to park. So I think when opportunities come up for this, I think the more that we can do to ease parking requirements downtown, and it sounds like we're doing these things, and that's promising. I think the more we should look to do that, because I'd much rather save Steeple Theaters than build parking lots. So thanks again for the work that you guys all did on this, and to you guys that added comments too. Appreciate that.
Okay. You forgot to finish out the phrase of if they tore down the Steeple for a parking lot.
Oh yeah, I can't
What
remember
would you be
the
going to see to park? What would you be going down there,
There
to
you
park
go.
for? If you got rid of all your buildings. So. Okay, well, if there's no other thoughts or comments or anything, I'd entertain a motion then.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 15-7174, expressing support for a proposal to use low-income housing tax credits to partially fund the redevelopment of the Lee Building provided by Flint Hills Holding Group, LLC, and modify the resolution to include language to the second whereas, to read, whereas the 48 dwelling units will have affordable rents targeted to individuals and families with low to moderate incomes with a minimum of 10% market rate. Is that a semicolon and?
Okay.
Second that.
Motion in several seconds to approve resolution number 15-7174 with all of the stated phrases. I won't try and repeat them all. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries 5-0. That takes us into other business. Any other business before the other business? Okay, if not,
I move to recess into executive session for 30 minutes for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to non-elected city personnel for the reason that public discussion of the matter would violate the privacy rights of the non-elected personnel involved, and reconvene at 6:10.
do we anticipate any business?
Can we,
I hope not.
can we make that 15?
Yeah,
Because
I
I
wasn't sure
think
what
we
to put.
may-
That's just a holding time. If you
Right.
want to go 15, you can always ask for
Yeah,
I
why don't we
think
do?
15 should be sufficient.
Okay.
15
Minutes?
minutes?
Yeah.
It's never
The optimism.
sufficient for this commission.
Let's start with 15.
It's never sufficient.
I think that we'll probably need closer to 15.
You want to say 6 o'clock?
Do you know something we don't?
Go do 20. We'll
He
do it.
must.
20 minutes. We'll do it at 6, and I'll second that. We'll make it 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
20, I'll second.
If you think you can do it in 20
Okay.
minutes.
I'll second to
Okay, motion is second to move into executive session for 20 minutes and reconvene at 6 o'clock. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
When Haley Hughes was graduating high school this past summer, she had good grades. She was on the honor roll every year.